I've always enjoyed hiking alone. For some people that sounds strange, but for me, it was peaceful. No traffic, no phones ringing, just trees, wind, and the sound of your own footsteps on the trail. But after what happened 3 years ago, I haven't gone hiking by myself again. And whenever someone tells me they're planning a solo hike, I always feel the urge to warn them, even though I'm not sure they'd believe me. It started as a normal day. I had taken a day off work and decided to drive a few hours out of the city to check out a forest trail I'd seen online. It wasn't very popular, which actually makes it more appealing to me. I like the quiet trails, the ones where you could walk for miles without seeing another person. The weather was perfect that afternoon, cool but not cold, with just enough sunlight filtering through the trees to make the forest look almost golden. I parked near the trail entrance, grabbed my backpack, and started walking. My plan was simple: hike up to a viewpoint I read about, take a few photos, enjoy the sunset, and then head back before it got dark. For the first couple of hours, everything was exactly how you'd want a hike to be. Peaceful, birds chirping in the distance, wind brushing through the leaves. Every now and then I'd hear a squirrel or something rustling through the brush. Normal forest sounds. Earlier on the trail, I passed a few other hikers heading back toward the parking lot. We did the usual polite nods people do on hiking trails, but after a while, I noticed something. I hadn't seen another person for a long time. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Some trails just get quiet the deeper you go. Still, the longer I walked, the more silence started to feel heavy. Eventually, I reached the viewpoint. It was worth the hike. The treetops opened up to a rocky ledge overlooking miles of forest stretching toward the horizon. The sun was already starting to sink lower in the sky, turning everything orange and red. I stayed there for a bit, taking pictures and just enjoying the moment. But time moves fast when you're relaxed. By the time I checked my phone again, the sun was already dropping behind the hills. All right, I said to myself, time to head back. I started down the trail again. Almost immediately, I noticed how quickly the light was disappearing. The forest canopy blocked most of the remaining sunlight, and within minutes the trail was looking darker and darker. Still manageable, but definitely darker. I pulled out my phone just in case I needed the flashlight later. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Somewhere behind me. At first I didn't think much of it. Someone else could have been on the trail heading back. I stepped slightly to the side of the path to let them pass, but the footsteps stopped. Completely. I turned around. The trail behind me was empty. Just trees and shadows. I stood there for a moment listening. The forest suddenly felt quieter than before. Too quiet. After a few seconds, I shook my head and laughed a little at myself. You're just being paranoid. So I kept walking. A minute later, the footsteps started again. Slow, careful, crunching softly on leaves and matching my pace. I stopped walking. They stopped. I turned around quickly and turned on my phone's flashlight, shining it down the trail. Nothing. No movement. Just the beams of my light cutting through the trees and darkness. The uneasy feeling in my stomach started growing. I told myself it was probably an animal, or maybe someone stepping off the trail when I turned around. Either way, I decided it was time to get back to my car. I started walking faster. A few minutes later, something on the side of the trail caught my attention. It was a backpack. It was lying partly in the dirt near a cluster of trees. It was old, dirty, like it had been there for a while. I slowed down. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I looked around but didn't see anyone. For a moment I thought about ignoring it and continued down the trail, but curiosity has a way of pulling you closer to things you probably shouldn't investigate. So I stepped off the path and nudged the backpack with my foot. Right then, I heard a branch snap. Behind me, loud enough to echo through the trees. I spun around immediately and pointed my flashlight toward the sound. For a split second, I saw someone, standing between two trees, maybe 20 or 30 feet away. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching me. The light barely reached him, but I could make out the shape of a person. Tall, still. Something about the way they stood there felt wrong. They were too still and too quiet. "Hey," I called out. "Do you need help?" No response. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They didn't even shift their weight. They just stared at me from the darkness. My heart started pounding in my chest, and then slowly, very slowly, they stepped backward. One step, then another, and until the trees swallowed them completely. That was more than enough for me. I didn't care about the backpack anymore. I turned and started walking quickly down the trail. After a few seconds, I I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were closer and faster. I didn't hesitate. I started running. Branches scraped against my arm, and I rushed down the dark trail. My phone's flashlight bounced wildly, barely lighting the ground ahead of me. Behind me, I could hear something moving through the leaves. Keeping up, the trail felt endless. Every second stretched longer and longer. Then finally, through the trees, I saw something. Lights. The faint glow of the parking lot. I ran the rest of the way. When I reached my car, I jumped inside and slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. My chest was heaving as I looked back toward the trail entrance. The forest stood there in complete darkness. Silent. Nothing came out. No footsteps. No person. Just black trees swaying in the wind. I started the car and drove away faster than I probably should have. All the way home. I kept trying to explain to myself, maybe it was just another hiker. Maybe they didn't want to talk. Maybe they were just as scared as I was. But something about the way they stood there, watching me silent from the trees, just still doesn't sit right with me. Here's the strangest part. Later that night, I looked up the park's website. The trail had officially closed 2 hours before I even started my hike, which means if someone was out there in the forest with me, they weren't supposed to be either. It was one of those mornings that still feels half asleep. You know, where the sun hasn't fully decided to rise yet, the streetlights are still humming faintly, and the cold air hangs heavy with mist. The stores along the road were shuttered, metal grates pulled down, no traffic except the occasional motorbike coughing through the fog. Most people were still asleep. My friend and I were walking to school like we always did, cutting through the same shortcut that passed the old landfill outside of town. It wasn't the nicest route, but it shaved 10 minutes off the walk. And when you're a teenager, 10 extra minutes of sleep feels like everything. That morning felt different. Before we even reached the landfill, I noticed a crowd. People were standing in a tight circle near the edge of the road. Some had their hands over their mouths, others were whispering to each other. A few were craning their necks to see over their shoulders. Then I smelled it. Not the usual garbage smell, something metallic, something sharp. The kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat, like blood. My friend slowed down. "What's going on?" he muttered. We looked a little closer. The murmuring from the crowd grew louder. "Someone found this morning. Looks like his head. Call the police." That was enough for my brain to put the pieces together. Someone was dead. My stomach tightened immediately. "I think we should go," I said quietly. But my friend leaned forward, trying to peek between people. "No way," he said. "We came this far." I shook my head. "Let's just go to school. We're already late." He looked at me and smirked. "What's wrong? Afraid of seeing a dead body?" The way he said it made a few nearby people glance at us. "I'm serious," I said. "Let's go." He laughed under his breath. "You wait here. I'm going to take a look. I'll be back in a minute." Before I could stop him, he slipped into the crowd. I stayed back on the road, hugging my backpack tightly. People were already calling the police. I could hear someone speaking urgently on the phone. A few others were saying that the authorities were on the way. That meant the body wouldn't stay here long. Part of me felt relieved, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. I tried not to look. I really did. But as the crowd shifted slightly, a gap opened between two people. And through that gap, I saw something. A hand. Just a hand lying on the dirt. Pale, completely still. Next to it was a dark pool spreading slowly across the ground. Fresh blood. I looked away immediately, my chest tightening. My friend came back a minute later, looking both excited and disturbed. "Dude," he said breathlessly. I didn't respond. "You should have seen it." "I didn't want to," I said. He lowered his voice like he was sharing some secret. "The guy's head, it's not even attached." I felt a cold shiver crawl down my back. "What do you mean?" "It's like separated," he said, making a slicing motion across his neck. "His body's over there, and his head is a few feet away. Stop." But the weirdest part, his face is upside down, and his eyes are just open. "Stop talking about it." He shrugged. "Some people took pictures. If I get them, I'll send them to you. Please don't." But he just grinned and started walking towards school. The whole day, I couldn't focus on anything. During class, whispers about the body spread through the entire school. Some kids claimed it was a murder. Others said it was a gang execution. One person swore they heard the man had been tortured first. Rumors grow fast when something horrible happens. By the time school ended, the story had already changed a dozen times. When we walked back past the landfill that afternoon, the crowd was gone. Police tape fluttered in the wind, white chalk markings stained the dirt. One outlined where the body had been, another where the head was found. My friend pointed. "See? Told you." I didn't say anything. We kept walking. That night, the entire neighborhood talked about it. Neighbors standing outside their houses, kids whispering about the pictures, adults speculating about the killer. Even my parents mentioned it over dinner. I pretended not to care, but deep down, curiosity was growing again. I wanted to know what everyone else had seen. I wanted to stop feeling like the only person who had looked away. Later that night, as I was getting ready to sleep, my phone buzzed. A message from my friend. 3 images. My heart started beating faster. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute. Part of me wanted to delete them without opening, but the other part, the curious part, well, it won. I opened the first picture with my eyes closed, just like a kid about to jump into cold water. Then I slowly cracked one eye open, just a tiny peek, then both. The image filled my screen. The man's head laying in the dirt, tilted sideways, almost upside down. His eyes were wide open, too wide. Dark blood pooled inside them like tiny red lakes. More blood leaked from his nose and mouth. His body was a few feet away, completely lifeless. Something about the angle of the photo made it seem like he was looking at the camera. Looking at me. My chest tightened, and I locked the phone immediately. I sat there for a long time in the dark. Honestly, the hardest part wasn't seeing the image. It was finding my imagination before opening it. All day I'd pictured something far worse. So at first, I even felt stupid. Like I'd missed an opportunity earlier. If I just looked that morning, maybe I wouldn't have felt this way. Felt like such a coward. That's what I thought at the time. But that night, the dream started. The first nightmare was simple. Just the head, lying in the dirt, eyes open, staring at me. Second night, it got worse. The man was standing in my room, holding his own head in his hands, blood dripping onto my floor. Sometimes he appeared crying, sometimes shouting, sometimes just staring at me with those same wide eyes from the photo. I don't understand why. I only saw a picture. I wasn't even there when it happened. So why does he keep coming back? I've deleted the images. I avoid the landfill road now, and every night before I sleep, I pray. Because sometimes, just before I wake up, I swear I hear someone whisper beside my bed, and the voice sounds wet, like it's speaking through a mouthful of blood. It was 11:30 when Jonas finally gave up on trying to sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of the house settling in the cold winter air. Outside, crickets chirped somewhere beyond the walls, and every so often the wind brushed against the roof, making the rafters groan softly above him. Beside him, his wife was completely asleep. The slow rhythm of her breathing rose and fell under the blankets. She had been out for hours. Jonas envied her. He turned his head slightly and looked toward the small nightstand beside the bed. The faint glow of the baby monitor lit the room with a dull blue light. On the screen, their 9-month-old daughter Beth slept peacefully in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell. One arm was curled beside her face. Jonas let out a quiet sigh. At least someone in his house can get some sleep, he muttered under his breath. He carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake his wife, and padded quietly down the hallway toward the kitchen. The floorboards creaked softly under his weight. The kitchen light flicked on with a dull buzz. Jonas opened the refrigerator and stared inside. Leftover pasta, half a loaf of white bread, celery sticks, an apple that had started to wrinkle. Nothing looked good. He closed the fridge and rubbed his eyes, suddenly feeling more tired than hungry. "Forget it," he mumbled. A few minutes later, he returned to the bedroom and slipped back under the covers. The room was quiet again. Cold wind brushed against the house. Crickets chirped, and the faint glow of the baby monitor illuminated the darkness. Then a sound came from the speaker. A soft cry. Jonas lifted his head slightly. He glanced toward the monitor. Beth was still lying in her crib exactly the same way, fast asleep. Her mouth wasn't even open. He waited. The cry didn't come again. Maybe she had made a noise in her sleep. Babies did that sometimes. Jonas exhaled slowly and leaned back into the pillow. But just before his head fully touched the mattress, the sound came again. Louder this time. a weak, trembling cry. Jonas sat upright immediately. He looked back toward the baby monitor. The screen still showed Beth lying perfectly still in her crib. Her eyes closed, her breathing slow and steady, but the crying through the speaker didn't stop. In fact, it was getting louder. What had started as a soft whimper quickly turned into a strained, desperate wail. It sounded like a baby crying in pain. Jonas's chest tightened. That's not right. He swung his leg out of bed and hurried down the hallway toward Beth's room. The crying grew louder with every step. High-pitched, frantic, almost choking, he pushed open the door and froze. The crib was empty. The crying stopped instantly. The room fell silent. Jonas felt his stomach drop. Beth? He stepped slowly inside the room. The crib blankets were crumpled, but his daughter was gone. Then he heard something behind him, a slow scraping sound. Jonas turned just in time to see the closet door sliding shut. A click. His heart slammed violently in his chest. Something was inside the closet. Something had taken his baby. "Claire!" he shouted, calling for his wife. No answer. He rushed back toward the bedroom door, but something was wrong. The hallway outside looked different, darker. The lights that had been on earlier were gone. The entire hallway seemed to be swallowed in a deep shadow that stretched endlessly away from the doorway, like an empty tunnel. Jonas stepped toward it, cautiously. The darkness seemed to stare back. Then the bedroom door behind him slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Jonas spun around and grabbed the handle. It was locked. He pulled harder. It wouldn't even budge. "Claire!" he shouted again. Nothing. Then something whispered from the other side of the door. A voice, low and dark. "Jonas." His blood ran cold. It sounded almost like his wife's voice, but the way it said his name was wrong, stretched, twisted, like something wearing her voice instead of speaking with it. Jonas stumbled backward, his leg hitting the edge of the bed. He collapsed on the floor, then the crying started again. This time it was coming from the closet, a thin, desperate wail. "Beth!" Jonas scrambled to his feet and ran toward the closet. The crying intensified, echoing against the walls like it was coming from somewhere much deeper. He grabbed the handle and yanked the door again. Darkness, thick and endless. Without thinking, Jonas stepped inside. The floor disappeared beneath him. Suddenly he was falling, spinning downward through the darkness that twisted like a spiral around him. The sound of Beth crying echoed all around. Then he slammed into something cold. Water. Jonas gasped as he pushed himself upright. Shallow black water stretched in every direction, endless. The surface rippled gently under his movement. The air was freezing. His breath came out in small clouds. Far ahead in the darkness he heard the crying again. "Beth!" he shouted desperately. His voice echoed across the water, no response. "Beth, where are you?" Something moved. A pale shape slid slowly toward him through the water. Jonas squinted into the darkness. "Beth?" The shape came closer and closer. Then the moonless black water reflected its form. It was small, white, and crawling. The thing moved on its hands and feet in an unnatural rhythm, somewhere between crawling and walking. Its joints bent the wrong way, its limbs stretched too far. As it approached, Jonas realized something horrible. It wasn't his daughter, but it was making the exact same cry. Jonas took a step backward. His thoughts suddenly felt strange, fuzzy, confused. He blinked slowly. Why had he called it Beth? Since when did he even have a daughter? For that matter, when had he even gotten married? A sharp headache pulsed behind his eyes. He pressed his palms against his temple. What is happening? The crawling thing continued moving toward him. Its limbs multiplied. One arm became two. Two became three. More joints twisted out of its body like broken branches. A long black tendril stretched from its back into the darkness behind it, like something enormous was connected to it. Jonas fell backward into the water, scrambling away in terror. The creature suddenly stopped. Its cries ceased. Then it lifted slowly into the air, as if something invisible had grabbed it. In one violent motion, it was yanked backward into the darkness. A deep moan echoed across the water. Heavy footsteps followed. Each step sent ripples across the endless black surface. Something massive was approaching. Then it emerged. The creature towered over him, at least 10 meters tall. Its body was covered in writhing limbs and twisting tendrils that dragged across the water like living ropes. Half of its enormous head was covered in dozens of blinking eyes. The other half was filled with wide, drooling mouths that opened and closed hungrily, and perched above its head, like the glowing lure of a deep-sea fish, was the small, white, crawling creature, crying softly again. The monster stepped closer. Jonas tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't come out. One enormous arm reached down from the writhing mass of limbs and grabbed him. The creature lifted him into the air, the mouths on its head opening wide, rows of teeth glistening in the darkness, and before Jonas could even make a sound, they snapped shut. The water rippled quietly as droplets of blood fell onto the black surface. Then everything went still. Outside the house, crickets chirped in the cold winter air. The winds brushed against the roof, shifting the rafters slowly. Inside the bedroom, the baby monitor glowed faintly on the nightstand. On the screen, Beth slept peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling. The room was quiet. It was peaceful. And somewhere deep in the darkness beyond the screen, something enormous slowly closed its jaws.